Why do we still feel like imposters, even when we were once told we were the smartest in the room? Why do we hesitate with every new decision, second-guessing ourselves, even when we carry the label of gifted? What exactly broke inside of us, and when? Being intelligent can feel like a superpower until it becomes a curse in disguise. What starts as praise slowly transforms into pressure, and before we realize it, we're trapped in a silent prison built out of expectations. This isn't about failure. This is about a broken promise, a quiet expectation that morphed into a burden. Because when you grow up being told you're special, brilliant, different, self-doubt hits differently. It hurts more. It shames you. It silences you. You think, I should be further by now. I'm not allowed to fail. I can't disappoint them. If this feels familiar, you're not alone, and you're not broken. In this video, we're diving into the quiet crisis so many gifted children face as adults, feeling emotionally numb, paralyzed, or invisible. We're going to unpack why this happens, what it steals from us, and most importantly, how to reclaim who we really are beneath the mask of brilliance. You'll see yourself in these stories, in the metaphors, in the silence you never knew how to explain. You'll feel spoken to finally, because maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just trapped in a version of yourself that no longer makes sense, one you've outgrown. Let's begin this journey, not to become extraordinary, but to finally feel human again. It starts with something that seems innocent, a compliment, a smile. You're so smart. You're going to go far. You're special. As a child, those words feel like sunlight. They make us stand taller. They push us forward. But over time, something begins to shift. That praise stops being encouragement and becomes a requirement. Piece by piece, we build a golden armor. At first, it protects us from failure, from criticism, from insecurity, but eventually, it becomes a cage. We stop trying new things because new means risk. We stop asking questions because not knowing feels like weakness. We become experts at avoiding anything that could expose us as ordinary. We learn that effort is for those who aren't gifted, that struggling means we're not as smart as they said. So we stick to the easy wins, the predictable paths, the zones where we shine with the least resistance. And the world rewards us for it. But deep down we know we're not growing. We're just performing. The psychologist Carol Dweck captured this perfectly. In her research on mindsets, she found that kids praised for their intelligence avoid challenges, but kids praised for their effort, they embrace difficulty, they try, they fail, they grow. When you're told your value is in being smart, making mistakes feels like betrayal, like you're breaking the one thing that made you lovable. So you learn to hide, to polish, to pretend. Imagine this, a brilliant 8-year-old who breezes through every math problem. He's called a genius, but one day he hits a wall, a problem he can't solve, and suddenly he's not just confused, he's afraid. What if I'm not who they think I am? That's how it begins. The slow death of curiosity, sacrificed on the altar of image. And this fear, it doesn't go away. It just evolves. It follows you into adulthood, into your job, your relationships, your dreams. You start declining opportunities before they begin. Not because you don't want to grow, but because failure would feel like exposure. You stop asking for help. You avoid feedback. You rehearse everything in your head before saying it out loud, because sounding unsure is not an option. You choose safety over challenge. familiarity over growth, and you tell yourself, I'm just being smart. But the truth is, you're being safe, and safe is slowly killing your potential. This is the hidden cost of early praise. It doesn't teach us how to fall. It teaches us how to pretend we never stumble. And that's a burden no one should have to carry alone. Adulthood doesn't care how smart you were as a kid. There are no gold stars for potential, no extra credit for how quickly you used to solve problems. Out here, things don't come with instructions, and talent on its own starts to fall short. And that's where the crisis begins. Because suddenly, the identity built around being brilliant starts to crack. The world demands things that intelligence alone can't give you: resilience, humility, initiative, patience. And if all you've ever known is performing at high levels without effort, you're not equipped for the messiness of real life. You feel it in the job you keep postponing, in the dreams you never start, in the decisions you avoid, in the anxiety that shows up every time you think about failing in front of others. What looks like procrastination is often paralysis, a deep fear of not living up to the image others had of you, or worse, the image you had of yourself. So you retreat into comfort, into analysis, into overthinking. You start living in your head because out there things are too unpredictable, too risky, too raw. You tell yourself you're just being careful, strategic, but in truth, you're terrified. Terrified of discovering that maybe you're not as capable as everyone once thought. You begin to fake confidence. You stay in conversations where you already know the answers. You take jobs where you're never challenged. You become masterful at appearing okay, even when you feel completely stuck. And what makes it worse? On the surface, everything seems fine. People still see you as competent, articulate, maybe even successful. But inside, you feel like a shell, disconnected from your drive, from your creativity, from your life. You stop dreaming. You avoid discomfort. You build a routine so tight, so predictable, that there's no room for failure or for growth. Because every mistake now feels fatal, not to your life, but to your identity. And you can't risk that. So you stay silent in meetings. You delay launching that project. You ghost opportunities that ask too much of you emotionally. You overthink every email, every response, every move. Not because you don't know the answer, but because you're terrified of being wrong. You've spent years being the one who gets it, the one others rely on, the one who doesn't miss. So now, anything less than perfect feels like exposure, feels like weakness, and it's isolating, paralyzing, exhausting. But here's the truth no one told you. Your worth was never supposed to be tied to perfection. Being smart was never meant to be your prison. It was just one part of you. And you're allowed, deeply allowed, to be more than that. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't scream. It doesn't look sad. It doesn't cry for help. It hides behind good grammar and articulate thoughts. It lives in people who seem fine, thoughtful, composed, capable. But inside they feel detached, like observers of their own lives. That's the loneliness of the gifted child turned adult. Someone who learned early on to think instead of feel, to analyze instead of connect. You could sense people's emotions before they said a word. You read between the lines. You understood everyone, except yourself. And over time, that became your default. Understanding the world through intellect, not emotion. Because emotions are messy, vulnerable, unpredictable. They require surrender, not mastery. and surrender was never part of your training. So you became excellent at empathy, but only the kind that keeps you safe. Cognitive empathy. You could explain what someone felt without actually feeling it with them. You know what that turns you into? An incredible observer and a deeply absent participant. Someone who can explain love, but doesn't know how to receive it. Someone who offers advice, but can't ask for help. Someone who's admired, but rarely felt. And slowly, your inner world becomes quieter. Not peaceful, just numb. You find yourself more comfortable watching people than being with them. You avoid small talk because it feels pointless, and deep conversations because they feel dangerous. You start saying, people just don't get me. But sometimes, it's not that they don't get you. It's that you've stopped letting them. You've built a wall so sharp, so polished, it looks like strength. But it's just fear. Fear of being misunderstood, of looking foolish, of needing something you can't explain. And that wall, it's keeping you safe, but it's also keeping you isolated. The tragedy is that the people around you often have no idea. You still make them laugh. You still offer the perfect insight at the perfect time. You still seem okay. But the truth is, you miss feeling things deeply. You miss spontaneity, laughter that isn't filtered, connection that isn't rehearsed, touch without tension. You miss being human. But here's the hard part. Reconnection requires risk. The risk of being wrong, the risk of being seen in your confusion, the risk of not having the answer for once. It means saying things that might not sound brilliant, just honest. It means showing up to moments without a script, without performance. And yes, you might stumble. You might not get it right the first time, but you'll be real. And real is where healing happens. Real is where the mask slips off and someone looks at you. Not because you're impressive, but because you're present. Maybe that's what you've been missing. Not more thinking, not more books, not more insight, but presence. Simple, unguarded, imperfect presence. The kind that doesn't need to be profound to be powerful. Here's a truth that might sting at first, but could free you. You're not broken. You're just tired. Tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of carrying an identity that was never built to evolve. Because when you grow up being the smart one, you don't get to be confused. You don't get to be messy. You don't get to fall apart. So you adapt. You learn to look confident even when you're terrified. You become self-reliant because asking for help feels like admitting defeat. And little by little, you lose touch with your own needs. You're not unmotivated. You're emotionally exhausted. You're not lazy. You're overfunctioning, mentally, constantly trying to keep up the illusion that you're okay. That's what makes this so hard to see. From the outside, you look like someone who has it together. But on the inside, you're crumbling under the pressure of being fine. It's not your fault. You were praised for what you could do, not for who you are. You were rewarded for being exceptional, not for being human. And now, you don't know how to be anything else. But here's the shift. You don't have to keep performing. You don't have to maintain the character of the perfect prodigy. It's okay to slow down, to admit you're overwhelmed, to ask for help, to not know. The child you once were thought being brilliant would make you safe, that if you were impressive enough, no one could hurt you. But brilliance became armor, and armor, over time, becomes isolation. It's time to take it off. You don't have to prove your worth anymore. You just have to come home to yourself. And maybe that's the most courageous thing you'll ever do. to stop chasing the image and start living the truth. To say, I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring things out. And that doesn't make me less, it makes me real. There's beauty in uncertainty. There's growth in the stumble. There's healing in the question, not just the answer. You were never supposed to be perfect. You were supposed to be whole. And wholeness includes failure, includes not knowing, includes letting people see you before you're ready. Wholeness doesn't need applause. It just needs presence. You might be tired because you've been living for a version of yourself that's long gone. The overachieving child, the people-pleasing teen, the never-wrong adult. And letting go of that version might feel like loss, but it's actually freedom. Because what comes next isn't about impressing others. It's about finding peace inside your own skin. Maybe the goal was never to be exceptional. Maybe the real goal is to feel alive again. Healing doesn't begin with a grand gesture. It begins with a whisper, a small defiant thought. Maybe I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. That single sentence can shake everything, because once you start seeing effort as a virtue instead of a flaw, the world changes. You stop hiding. You start experimenting. You allow yourself to be a beginner again. And that's the most radical act for someone who's always been the expert. You learn that making mistakes doesn't make you less intelligent. It makes you more alive. Because life isn't a test to pass. It's a landscape to explore. When you stop measuring your worth by how quickly you succeed, you begin to notice something strange. You're not as broken as you thought. You're just tired of performing. And when the performance ends, healing begins. It begins in the moments where you say, I don't know, and mean it. Where you try something new and fail, but laugh anyway. Where you let someone see your confusion and realize they don't love you less. It begins when you look in the mirror and stop trying to impress the reflection. When you finally allow yourself to learn, not just perform. When you breathe without needing to prove something. This is not weakness. This is not regression. This is rebirth. But let's be honest. Healing is uncomfortable, especially when you've built your identity on knowing, on succeeding, on controlling the narrative. Healing requires surrender, the willingness to step off the pedestal and say, I'm human. I get things wrong. I'm learning. And it's terrifying at first, but also liberating, because once you stop hiding behind the mask of brilliance, people can finally see the real you. And that real you, the one who tries, fails, doubts, and keeps showing up, that version is far more courageous than any image of perfection. You start asking better questions. What do I want to explore? Instead of, what will make them proud? What feels honest? Instead of, what sounds impressive? And slowly you build a new kind of confidence. Not the kind that comes from certainty, but the kind that's born from honesty, from knowing that even when you mess up, you are still enough. You begin to take risks, not because you're sure of the outcome, but because you're no longer afraid of being imperfect. You start reaching out, sharing your fears, saying, I'm struggling, and realizing you're not alone. You begin to connect again, not through intellect, but through presence, through your real, raw, unpolished self. And this perhaps is the most healing truth of all. You don't have to be extraordinary to be loved. You just have to be here, whole, willing, human. Maybe you were never lost. Maybe you were just exhausted from holding up a version of yourself that never gave you peace. You don't need to keep proving your worth through performance. You don't need to carry the weight of brilliance alone. And you certainly don't need to be perfect to be whole. The truth is, you were never meant to be a mask. You were meant to be a person, raw, complex, growing. So this is your invitation, to step down from the pedestal, to take off the armor, to come walk with us on the imperfect, beautiful ground of being fully human. Start small. Let yourself try things you're not good at. Say, I don't know, and feel proud. Rest without guilt. Connect without needing to impress. Show up not as the smartest person in the room, but the most honest. That's where life begins again. And if this video touched something in you, if it echoed a silence you've been carrying, then share that feeling. Comment below. Because when we put words to our wounds, we start to heal. And when you share your story, you help someone else feel less alone in theirs. Subscribe if you want more of this. More truth, more depth, more soul. This channel is not about perfection. It's about remembering who you were before the pressure, before the mask. And here's one last truth. One that maybe you've needed to hear for a long time. You never had to earn your place in this world. You belong, even in your uncertainty. You are worthy, even in your questions. You matter, even when you're not performing. So take a breath, come back to your body. Let go of the script. The real you, the one behind the accomplishments, the one who still feels lost sometimes, that's the you the world is waiting for. You're not broken, you're just human, and that is more than enough.